Hello, everybody. This is Kerry with the weekly look ahead, the astrological weather report for the upcoming week for July 26th, 2026 through August 1st. That carries us a Sunday through a Saturday, which is what I consider a week. Thanks for tuning in. This is a general forecast just to understand what the astrological weather patterns for the week may bring us. There are 4 major points I wanted to bring out today for our week ahead. Number 1, we're getting a full moon this week. The full moon comes on Wednesday, July 29th, while the moon is in Capricorn. We'll look into that more. We're also getting Saturn going into retrograde motion. That happens on Sunday, July 26th. Saturn retrograde happens every year. I'll point out more in a moment. The third thing is Venus is moving signs at the very end of the week on August 1st. So that's that. And then fourth is Mercury is direct. That happened last week. But I want to point out that sometimes when Mercury comes into direct motion, it takes half a week to a week for it to settle down and calm down. So we're just a few days out from that Mercury direct. If things are still a little wonky, give Mercury a moment to settle in and get direct again. Okay, so let's go back to Saturn retrograde. Saturn goes into retrograde once per year. Most of the planets, except for the sun and the moon and the nodes, will actually do a retrograde motion from time to time. Once per year, Jupiter and Saturn go into a retrograde phase. Jupiter's retrograde lasts for about 4 months, and Saturn's retrograde lasts for about 4.5 months. So from July 26th until December 12th, 2026, Saturn goes into retrograde motion. Let's dig into retrograde. We're coming off of Mercury going retrograde, but now we're getting into Saturn. So the idea of retrograde motion, retrograde, it kind of feels like going backwards into a thing. In the Sanskrit word for retrograde motion is vakri. Vakri. Vakri actually means bent or curved. It just means it's a little not straight. It's not straight. So the idea of like I'm putting it in reverse and going backwards isn't as much in the Sanskrit word that we use. So vakri. The other like another vakri thing or vakra thing, if you're into the Hindu deities. Ganesh. Ganesh is the one with the elephant head. One of his tusks is bent or curved. That's vakri. So that idea of things just not going in the straight direction that we expect. So it doesn't mean bad. It doesn't mean let's run for the hills. It means this planet is about to behave a little differently than what we expect. So with Saturn, we expect deliberate, slow pressure, responsibility, suffering. Saturn's job is a tough job. He reminds us all from on a day-to-day basis that we're here for a short time, that we have our karma to fulfill, that we have responsibility and duty, and that we basically can't get out of it. So Saturn's effects tend to bring us into the hard facts of life. The good thing about Saturn energy is that it does bring us into the reality and the practicality of life. It teaches us deep lessons. So we're actually doing our duty on a day-to-day basis when we're dealing with Saturn's effects. With retrograde Saturn, which happens once per year, I always feel like we have a chance to kind of make things move a little differently in a Saturn fashion. Like Saturn wants us to be deliberate and slow and check every box and get all of the details correct. Maybe with retrograde Saturn, we have a little chance to have things move a little slicker, or maybe we don't have to follow every single rule. We can get around things that tend to slow us down. So let's pay attention and tell me in the comments if you notice anything in the next few months with Saturn going into retrograde motion. The other one thing I want to mention is that in a big picture, I don't know, for the last 10 years or so, I've been noticing the times when Saturn and Jupiter are both retrograde and it's overlapping. That's been happening for a while, where we're having both Jupiter and Saturn in retrograde motion at the same time, which makes it really hard to predict how Jupiter and Saturn things are going to turn out. This year is interesting. In 2026, Saturn will go into direct motion on December 12th, 2026, and Jupiter will begin retrograde motion on December 13th, the next day. So no overlap this year. Let's see how that goes. Just something to notice, okay? All right, so Saturn retrograde begins on Sunday, the 26th. Let's see if things begin to change as far as the Saturn effects in our lives. You can report in. Let me know how it goes. Um, I'm looking at it as a positive opportunity. All right, so that's that thing. The other thing is talking about retrogrades, again, Mercury just went direct a few days ago. It's in its own sign of Gemini all of this week, in direct motion. I feel like that is a cool feature of the week ahead. Like Mercury in strength, in its own sign, in direct motion, and hopefully if things have been chaotic in July, let's say, because retrograde Mercury began in 29th of June. Um, if everything fell out of your pockets and all of the plans went south and nothing turned out how you thought, but in the process of dealing with all of that, you might have learned a few things. That's the gift of retrograde Mercury. So now Mercury's direct. We're going to begin our plans again and try to see if we can get things on track. Um, I also want to point out, yes, Venus is spending its last days this week in the sign of Leo. So Venus has been sort of leading the charge of the inner planets all year. And when it broke through past Ketu, our Kala Amrita Yoga instances of the spring ended up, and here we are with Venus kind of breaking through the Ketu gate. It will be really getting the distance in between there as Venus changes signs into Virgo, and that's on Saturday, August 1st. In the meantime, this week, if you can notice the degrees of both Mars and Venus, they're very similar to each other. And from Taurus, Mars is aspecting Leo, which is where Venus is. So there is an exact aspect of Mars to Venus this whole week. So what that feels like to me is Mars pushes and Venus receives. So it could feel like a creative project finally getting on the road. It could feel like a relationship feeling the heat of um, selfish action. There's so many different things that it could feel like. But just notice that this week, that could feel also like easy frustration. um like this isn't happening at the speed that I want it to happen at, and I want it to get going and I'm stuck. Both Mars and Venus are in fixed signs. Taurus and Leo tend to be a little stubborn, so that feeling of frustration of like I'm stuck here and I want to move and I want things to change, that could really head up this week. That feeling of like I got to do something, I got to push this through. So if you're feeling that way, go with Mars. He's ready for you. Okay, the other things about this week, full moon. We're having that full moon on Wednesday, and that will be when the sun is in Cancer and the moon is in Capricorn, and it will also, so Wednesday, the 29th of July, and right before the moment that the full moon culminates, the sun and Jupiter will be exactly conjoined. So that is fascinating to me. That is exact combustion of Jupiter at the moment that the moon is full. It The keywords for Wednesday, you'll see it's divine fusion. It feels just very potent. In the turning point of our week on Wednesday, the full moon comes. There's all the Jupiter energy pouring out right with the sun toward the moon in Capricorn. So again, let me know if anything fabulous happens on Wednesday for you. Um, what else? What else? Let's go through the day to day. Okay, let's go through the day keywords. I think I have, for the most part, caught everything I wanted to catch. All right, so Sunday and Monday, the moon will be in Sagittarius. That is a Jupiter ruled fire sign. It feels hopeful. It feels positive. While in Sagittarius, the moon is getting aspects from Saturn retrograde, right? Which usually feels like pressure when when Saturn is aspecting the moon. But with this retrograde motion, it could feel a little looser. So that's Sunday and Monday. The other planets that are aspecting Sagittarius at the moment are Mars with his ready to push thing, and Mercury, strongly organized in Gemini and direct motion. So, with all of that energy going toward the moon on Sunday and Monday, it feels like final preparations, cleaning and clearing, resolving things that are pending Sunday and Monday. All right, I'm gonna move us to Monday. Here, let me go through. I forgot to give you the details of Sunday. So the moon is in Mula Nakshatra on that day when Saturn goes retrograde, and there's a really rooted energy to Mula, and we're coming up to the full moon as well. So Sunday's keywords are radical approach. Radical approach. All right. Hold on. All my windows have moved around. Let me let me reorganize. See, Mercury direct takes a moment. All right. So this is Monday, July 27th. Oh no, I've gone too far. Hold on. I'm ahead of myself. So on Monday the 27th, the moon still is in fully in Sagittarius. We're going to get a direct um aspect from both all of those planets I mentioned, Saturn, Mars, and Mercury, they're all up in the 20-degree range. And so on Monday, the moon moves through that as well. So Monday could be possibly a little more intense than uh, Sunday. Okay. So Sunday, Mula. Monday, we've got the moon in Purvashada. The words for Monday are deep clean. So while it's intense, it still feels like things are moving on Monday with moon in Sagittarius. And then in Tuesday, which is the 28th of July, the moon starts out the day in Sagittarius and goes into Capricorn. So for the most part, Tuesday is Sagittarius to Capricorn. Tuesday, Wednesday, into Thursday, we're getting the Capricorn energy. Okay. So Tuesday, Uttarashada Nakshatra, and that's the moon pushing toward the full moment. Finally ripe are the words for Tuesday. And then we get to Wednesday. So Wednesday is the 29th. Kind of have a few notes aside from the full moon. So moon will be in Shravana Nakshatra, which is a lovely soft energy. The moon is associated with Shravana. It has that kind of receptive energy, even though it's sitting in the kind of dry, cold, hard environment of Capricorn. The moon gets full. I'm in Colorado, so for my time zone, it's around 8:30 a.m. Mountain time on on Wednesday. And Jupiter will be 100% combust on that day. The Sun and Jupiter exactly at the same degree. And then the exact conjunction, really it's an aspect, the exact aspect of Mars to Venus also on that day. So divine fusion for Wednesday. It seems like it could be kind of an exciting day. If we had to pick one day out of the week to watch, I'm picking Wednesday, the full moon day. Okay, Thursday is the 30th. We're winding up July. And Thursday, the moon is in Shravana to begin with, but then moves to Dhanishta Nakshatra. And it's the first day of the dark half of the moon. Dhanishta has a lot of rhythm to it. So generate rhythm is our word for Thursday. And Friday, we're moving to, the moon will move and start out the day in the very beginning of Aquarius, right next to Rahu. So Friday morning, the moon and Rahu are having a meeting at the exact same degree. And this is Aquarius energy. Dhanishta is the beginning of the day, and then the moon settles into Shatabishak. Shatabishak has a lot of healing vibes to it and a lot of variety and diversity energy to me. Plus the moon and Rahu are together. And that's also the day that Venus starts moving out of Leo. So feels a little risky. Risky business is the word for Friday. And I'm not saying watch out, everything's going to be difficult. I'm just saying that we have to keep going and there's always risks. So open your eyes, look for assess what's to be had and what's to be lost or what things are going to cost. We have to keep going. You have to make your interactions and transactions happen anyway. So risky business is Friday. And then we're going to get to Saturday, which is August 1st, the first day of the new month in the Western calendar. The moon is in Aquarius at the beginning of the day and will move barely into Pisces by the end of the week. So starts out in Shatabishak, moves into Purvabhadra Nakshatra, and it's the third day of the waning moon. So grow anyway is the keyword for Saturday and also for the whole week. The whole idea I'm trying to put across this week is that things are moving, not always in exactly the order that we think they're going to happen. And even though things aren't perfect and we maybe wanted them to be a certain way, they aren't. So you got to grow anyway. You just got to grow. So, all right, you guys, that's what I have for you this week. I appreciate you watching. Always love your feedback. Anything I can add into the mix. I'm have a lot of ideas right now. Mercury's in Gemini. That's good for me to brainstorm. So I'm looking to make some shifts and changes as the summer winds down and as fall comes online. In my day-to-day life, I do a few other things besides doing readings and making these videos for people. So those schedules are changing. So let me know. Let me know what you're in the mood for from me. Anything could happen. Okay. Take care, guys. Bye.